Hi everyone, we'll just give people a couple of minutes to join the session and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we'll make a start, and if people join us a little bit later, they can just tune in. Georgina, do you want to start us off? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. Now everyone can hear me. Welcome everybody to this special event. Just to give you an idea of who I am. So the Wolverhampton Literature Festival is an annual event hosted by the Arts and Culture Services and Library Services within the Wolverhampton City Council. The festival runs over a 3-day period across the city in February. And today we're excited to bring to you this special satellite event that we're delivering in collaboration with the University of Wolverhampton and Novel Perspectives. Tonight, we hope to give you a lively and rich conversation that focuses on championing diversity and inclusion amongst the literary world. We hope you enjoy tonight's conversation with Patrick Vernon, Lisa Blower and Elizabeth Dearnley, who'll be your chair for tonight. I personally can't wait to hear what will be discussed and to possibly introduce some different authors, writers and poets that I'm not already aware of. And so on that note, I'm going to pass over to your chair tonight to start tonight's events.
Thanks so much, Georgina. So welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining us on this really nice sunny evening. The sun's streaming in from where I'm in South London, so I hope some of you will be able to tune in from outside. So I'm Elizabeth Dearnley, and I'm part of the Novel Perceptions project based at the University of Wolverhampton, and I'm really excited to be hosting this event tonight as part of the Wolverhampton Literature Festival. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So we're going to have a dedicated space for a Q&A at the end, but do please post any questions and comments you might have in the Q&A box or in the chat if you prefer. As the event goes on. We are also recording this event, so just be aware of that, and don't post anything that you wouldn't want to have recorded as well. So tonight's event is Beyond Bloomsday. So as you'll probably know from booking onto this, today is Bloomsday, the 16th of June, named for the day in 1904 on which James Joyce's Ulysses take place, when Leopold Bloom wanders the streets of Dublin. So this has been a day that's been celebrated by Joyce fans since a few years after its publication in 1922. So firstly, a few fans gathered to mark what they called Bloomsday, also sending James Joyce flowers the colour of the book jacket to mark the event. And then it sort of went on from there and has become this worldwide literary phenomenon. So tonight I don't want to detract in any way from Bloomsday. I want to stress we're calling it Beyond Bloomsday, not anti-Bloomsday, but really wanted to take this as a starting off point for thinking about literary commemoration more broadly, thinking about the way we celebrate and commemorate writers, thinking about which writers and which books are honoured with literary days, statues and other forms of memorialisation. So before we get onto the discussion, I also want to say a little bit briefly about how this fits in with our research at the University of Wolverhampton. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Just do that now. Okay. So there we go. So Novel Perceptions Towards an Inclusive Canon is the project that we're working on. And again, it's asking similar questions about how the canon of English literature is formed. That is, the books which are generally agreed to be good, important, and worth studying, and thinking about the way how these decisions are made as to what goes onto the canon and how these find their way onto things like school syllabuses and reading lists. So who decides what counts as part of the canon and also what gets left out? And another thing we're interested in is what people actually think makes a good book. And is this the same thing as what people think makes a quote unquote literary book, however they're defining that? So we're wondering what people actually enjoy reading and what do they think they ought to be reading? And are those the same things? So the project's also closely linked with the BBC's Novels That Shaped Our World project, which is showcasing a list of 100 novels in the past 300 years put together by a panel of writers and critics, which we're now asking the public for their opinions on. And this is also where we're asking you to contribute to our research as well. So a big part of this project is mapping people's reading preferences across the UK and beyond. So we would really, really love it if you could take part in this by joining in our surveys. So the main survey that we're doing is called the Reader Review. This asks people for their opinions on novels published over the last 6 years. So I think my colleague Hope's just popped that in the chat for you. So it's an online survey. It'd be fantastic if you could do it and share your thoughts on books that you've read and books you haven't read as well. They can be included. And we've also put together several surveys on different genres of novel with the BBC. And if you complete these, you'll get recommendations about other books that you might enjoy along similar lines. So do please try these as well. And again, I think Hope's just popped that in the chat for you. So that's the background to today's event. And we're going to be thinking about some of these ideas about canon and about writers we celebrate and writers we don't celebrate, but should do over the course of this evening. And with me to discuss these are two writers from the West Midlands. Firstly, Dr Lisa Blower, who's an award-winning short story writer and novelist, whose most recent novel, Pondweed, takes readers on a road trip from Stoke-on-Trent to Wales. She's also published in the Common People anthology of working class writers, edited by Kit Duval. And Lisa's also senior lecturer in creative and professional writing at the University of Wolverhampton, where she continues to champion working class fictions and regional voices. And our second speaker is Patrick Vernon OBE, who is a social commentator, campaigner, and cultural historian. He's been at the forefront of several high-profile campaigns on cultural heritage and social justice in the UK over the last decade. Since 2010, he's been leading the campaign for Windrush Day, which is inaugurated in 2018. Next week, on the 22nd of June, it celebrates its 4th year. And Patrick's also the co-author of 100 Great Black Britons, which honours the achievements of 100 key Black British individuals throughout history. And Patrick also holds an honorary doctorate from the University of Wolverhampton for his work on migration history and equalities. So I'm really, really delighted to have them both with us today. So thanks so much for taking part. So just in terms of the structure of tonight's event, we're going to start off with a brief interactive quiz for the audience, and then we're going to have a conversation with Patrick and Lisa. And as I said, the final 15 minutes is just going to be a space for questions and discussion, but do post any questions that you might have as we go. So I wanted to start off by thinking about literary memorialisation in quite a concrete way and thinking about how effective or otherwise this might be by looking at statues of writers themselves. So I wanted to see if people recognised the following statues. So this is the first one. Who is this? If you can just answer in the poll. Is it Charlotte Bronte, Jane Austen, Elizabeth Gaskell, or George Eliot? Okay, let me move on to the next one. Okay, who is this? Is this Seamus Heaney, Ted Hughes, Dylan Thomas, or George Orwell? moving on. Who is this? Is this Ian Forster, Charles Dickens, Sigmund Freud, or Victor Hugo? Okay, next one. Is this Jean Rhys, Noor Inayat Khan, Catherine Mansfield, or Sarojini Naidu? And the last one, who does this represent? Is this Aphra Behn, Virginia Woolf, Mary Shelley, or Mary Wollstonecraft? Okay. So if everyone's answered those, can we see results? Not sure if I've got the results coming through. Well, whilst we're waiting for those to filter through, I will reveal the answers. You can see how you did. So the first one was Jane Austen. So that's the in Basingstoke Marketplace. Then we had Dylan Thomas in Swansea's Maritime Quarter, Charles Dickens in Centennial Park, Sydney. Charles Dickens was actually somebody who stipulated in his will that he didn't want any statues made of him because he thought that his works should speak for themselves, but it only took people about 20 years to completely disregard that and start building statues anyway. On the left here, we've got Noor Inayat Khan, who's better known as a Second World War resistance heroine, but she was also a children's writer. And she's still, as far as I know, the only statue of a named Asian woman in the UK. Oh, here we are. So we have results in the first one. Most people were right about Jane Austen. That's great. Dylan Thomas, yep, 70% of people, 71%, sorry, of people were right about Dylan Thomas. It's great. Charles Dickens, again, the winner, but we've got some discussion as to whether he could be the other ones. And this one, Noor was still the still one, but there's some discussion as to whether she could be the other ones as well. So I'm just juggling my notes on my phone and showing my screen, so got it all sorted. And then finally, Mary Wollstonecraft. Yeah, nearly 80% of people got that one right. So this is a statue that was put up last year, and quite a lot of people really strongly disliked this statue. I have to confess, I'm not a massive fan of it. But nevertheless, that was erected in Newington Green in London in 2020. So thanks everybody for taking part in that. It's great to see what people thought. So yeah, I guess just sort of starting off with this, think about these very concrete literary monuments. Is a statue even a good way to commemorate a writer in the first place? Is arguably quite a conservative way to do this. So you know, are there other ways, more playful ways, better ways in which we could commemorate? So I guess I just want to start off the discussion by asking you both that. So Lisa, do you want to Oh, sorry, you're still on mute.
Yes, sorry, I do apologise.
No worries.
Are statues the way to memorialise? I'm not so sure. I must admit, I mean, you know, coming from Stoke-on-Trent, the only statues I've known are of Stanley Matthews and Josiah Wedgwood. And, you know, and where I currently live in Shrewsbury, obviously we have a very imposing Charles Darwin outside Shrewsbury Library. And about 5 years ago, Mary Webb, who was a prolific Shropshire author, finally got a bust in the library gardens, but just the bust, you know, just the head really. And she's in this kind of shadow of him more than anything. But they're these kind of fixed, aren't they? These fixed positions, fixed locations, this idea that people should visit them, salute them, do what they want, you know, and the fact that there's been this constant undoing of them, isn't there, now, over the past year in particular. It's kind of shifted what their purpose is.
Absolutely. Patrick, you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, statues are a hot topic.
Absolutely.
At the moment, part of the culture wars. And it's interesting because just doing an exercise. I mean, I was just thinking how many statues, apart from Noah Khan, which I know because I've been working on the campaign with others to have more diversity and representation on banknotes. There aren't that many statues of Black people, Asian people in Britain anyway, to be quite named. I mean, name statues. I mean, it wasn't until 2016 that they had a statue of Mary Seacole around St Thomas Hospital. You know, so I think what we're at is interesting because when people think about statues, it's usually about dead white men. Usually.
Absolutely.
Let's face it, that's reality. And it's always a novelty when it's about a woman or a person of colour, etc. So there's more statues in Britain about cats and dogs than Black people. That tells us it.
That
I agree.
You know what I mean?
15.
No, it is about literature. You know, not even just you know. Cause I think with literature, obviously we've got a rich history in Britain of writers, and we've got new writers. Basically, but it's still writing, still exclusively preserved for people with money and wealth. Because to be a writer, you don't make much money being a writer, so you need to do other income stuff.
Absolutely.
So it's still, even though there is a democratization, you know, anyone can be self-published and you can have a blog and do all kind of stuff, and there are some people being successful writing blogs and making them to publications, and it's still a preserve. So the question is statues a memorial for the preserve of people well connected in society, or will we use it as a way to shine a light of people that's hidden histories have been excluded for many centuries and decades, really?
Absolutely. And I think it is a question. You know, do we as statues, as you say, it's a sort of fixed thing. You know, maybe it's not the best way, but on the other hand, is the answer to have no statues, or the answer just to have more? And I'm not so sure. But I mean, just thinking about other forms of memorialisation. Obviously, we're meeting on Bloomsday, a literary day. I mean, is having a celebratory day, is that a good way to recognise writers? Would you say?
I think so. I think writers don't get enough recognition, personally speaking. I would say that, wouldn't I? Well, we all would say that, wouldn't we? Complete bias going on here, stuff and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, obviously, writers don't get that recognition, and a lot of people, and we want to get more people to write. Everyone's got a story, everyone's got a book inside, and we all know that. And there are exceptional, fantastic writers. But I mean, I think there's probably lots of blue plaques of writers. Actually, I suppose there's more blue plaques than statues. So definitely in London, where I live currently, which is kind of, a real cultural mix of writers, artists, etc. There's a very strong tradition of writing and publishing in East London. So I think there's lots of blue plaques around the country celebrating writers, and often I think blue plaques got more significance because usually about that person lived in this property. And then it's all part of a cultural experience of having a statue than just simply having a statue. It could be anywhere, in the country.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that, actually, because when you think about, I mean, maybe it's the romantic in me, I don't know, but the fact that we do have charitable commissions like the National Trust and the English Heritage and the Lottery Fund, and we did have EU funding, but to kind of protect the Grasmeres, the Max Gates, the Monk's House, just to name but a few, I find that far more culturally enriching to actually go to these places to see where people have right. And as I say, it's that romantic vision of, gosh, if I could just sit in the corner now, would anybody notice me sort of squirreling away for an hour? And it is to kind of recognize that, but countrywide, I think that's the problem, is that a lot of it is very, in London, we expect to see it in London, not necessarily in Wolverhampton or anywhere else.
Yeah, completely. I suppose it's something about the sort of literary establishment and publishing more generally. I like so much of it is kind of London focused. Again, it gets back to that issue you were saying, Patrick, of people with money, people who are sort of in a place where they can do stuff. If you if you don't have family in London, you want to work in, say, publishing, whatever, it's really difficult if you don't have the if you can't do an unpaid internship or whatever. So again, then it sort of compounds. I suppose one thing, just thinking about the geography of literary celebration is during the pandemic, so much of it has been online. So we've been sort of creating these virtual spaces. In some ways, it's it makes it more difficult to connect. I mean, right now we're all faces on a screen on a Zoom at a literature festival, but on the other hand, it does open things up and allow discussions to be wider perhaps than they otherwise would be. I mean, do you think this sort of has a knock-on effect on sort of literary celebration? I'm thinking of things like the first Toni Morrison Day that was this year, and that's obviously been online, which limited things in terms of people gathering, but also made it more widely available.
It's interesting that, because my book came out last autumn, 100 Great Black Britons, and me and my co-author Angelina, we were hoping we would be in Waterstones, we would be everywhere, going to festivals, talk to people about the book, signing the book, having little chit chat, drink some wine, getting drunk. No, I was in my room, in my living room, like now, doing Zoom stuff. And actually, ironically, we had a bigger audience. So we had a bigger audience of people listening, not from the UK, but internationally, than having maybe like 30, 40 people in Waterstones. You know what I mean? So there is a kind of there is a positive thing about the lockdown, that reach is really important, but you miss that interaction. If you're a writer, you don't want to do stuff on Zoom all day long. Or do an online art course all day long. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You don't get that sort of energy, and as you say, like we're all in our living rooms. My housemate's cat's probably going to wander in at some point, and it's just this kind of slightly strange thing where you're with people and you're not with people. It's a strange space.
I mean, for the marketing people, they love it because they can sell more units, basically. You know what I mean?
There is that.
And it has sort of renegotiated business models, hasn't it? Really, the event, the festival circuit, etc. And I mean, it has enabled front seats for all in a way. It is inclusive, it is accessible, it is far more affordable, it's convenient, it reaches this global audience. And it also, with the the cyber environment being, it's this intertextual environment, it allows that discourse to keep kind of threading, and it's ongoing, but at the same time you've got this overt digital reliance, the inequalities that come with that. Unfortunately, the fact that what Patrick is saying, you're kind of viewing it all in isolation. It's not a social event. Yes, it's a community of like minds, but we're all a little bit like, do I speak now? Do you know what I mean? I think it certainly has its benefits, it certainly has its cons, but that's the online environment, isn't it? But, for everything that's a positive, you've got something that's counterproductive.
And I think sort of going forward, as we hopefully emerge from all of this, the trick will be to try to keep the best of both worlds, get people coming together in real space, but not losing out in the way that it's made things so much more accessible in other ways.
Absolutely.
Just thinking actually, Patrick, about your 100 Great Black Britons, because obviously a major part of that campaign has been the website, which has been such an amazing resource. So I was wondering if you could say a bit about that as this digital space that you've created for celebrating these lives.
you know, it's interesting because I do a lot of writing, and this is my first actual proper book. But I've done loads of writing online, like you know, blogs and you know, developing the websites. I've developed quite a few websites over the years. So I mean, the 100 Great Black Britons is interesting because it's an example of a website which now has become essentially a book. In a nutshell. So I started the website many years ago, about 17, 18 years ago. It was actually in response to the BBC campaign, 100 Great Black Britons. And Britain was going through this identity crisis, like we always do every 10, 20 years. Who are we? Who's British? And you know, that kind of stuff. But during the time around, just after the millennium, you know, you had the rise in the SNP, demanding Scots independence in Wales. You know, in Welsh Cymru Party, and in England, in English regions, people were saying we want more power in the regions away from central government, away from Whitehall. So you know, so there's all kind of changes going on, and on top of that, the whole stuff around Europe again. You know what I mean? So the BBC had this fantastic idea for what if we go into the annals of history, find some great hero that will somehow bind the country together again. That was the idea of doing that. I mean, and the reason why I know that because the person behind that, the BBC idea, was Jane Root, who controlled the BBC Two at the time, and I actually met up with her. I had a meet. She actually wanted to meet me because when I did my campaign, it was a counter campaign to say, hold on, because in the official BBC 100 list, there's not one black or Asian person featured. Well, that's not true. There's Freddie Mercury from Queen. Basically, that was about it, really. You know, but I think the average person, if you looked at Freddie Mercury, you wouldn't think he was born in Zanzibar or Farsi parents. You probably think he was, you know, looked a bit dark, maybe thought he's got a Welsh background or something like that. But anyway, that's by the by. But anyway, so there was no person, a visible person of colour in that was featured. And even at the time, people were complaining about the BBC list. When you do lists, any kind of lists you see on TV. There's people are gonna get excluded. So at the time, a lot of feminists complained there weren't enough women that were featured in 100 Great Britons. There were not enough Welsh people. The Welsh complained, the Irish complained, the Scottish complained, and black people complained, the Asian people complained. So I thought, instead of complaining, let's do something different. So I decided a website, a counter campaign, to say, hold on, there's been a black presence in Britain going back 1,000 years, and here. And so what me and my colleague did is profiles individuals, and we copy the same principle the BBC did. Why don't you vote and vote for your greatest Black Briton of all time? And that's and we had so much public support, and it was brilliant. And so the public voted for Mary Seacole's Greatest Black Briton in 2004, and that led to a chain reaction of having more conversations around Black history, Black British history in particular. And as well, so I'm very proud that it's actually influenced lots of things in content. But I didn't have an idea of doing a book about it. It was just a website. It was just simply a website. Schools, politicians used it when I did quotes for Black History Month, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's only when I decided to relaunch a campaign again about 2 years ago. We were looking for new entries, and then I got approached by Robinson's, a part of Hashing, to say that, you know, we watched the website. It's a fantastic website. Could you write it as a book? And me and my colleague said, yeah, we can do that. And we were writing the book during the time of the lockdown and Black Lives Matter. So it was actually interesting doing that for that whole experience of doing the book. Really. So
No, it's fantastic. What sort of response have you had so far? So it's come out.
It did very well. I mean, we actually sold, our first print run was sold out before it was actually hit the bookshops.
Oh wow!
But because again, going back to the whole stuff around what we just talked about, the whole stuff around lockdown, people put online. But you know, so you know, we had lots of support. We had lots of marketing support from publishers. Waterstones pushed it online. I pushed it online because I got a lot of people from me, and that helps. So that the online world that we were forced to live in, ironically helped the book. We were a bestseller. Categories under 3 categories under Amazon: biographical reference, biographical history, and history of Cuba. Don't ask me why history of Cuba. The Cubans, but anyway, I don't know how. Anyway, it's probably how the algorithms did something. I don't know. I have no idea. Basically, but no, the book's done well, and the paperback's coming out in time for Black History Month this year. The book's going to be available as in America in the autumn. So that's quite exciting. But I'm not holding my breath because Americans Americans only know about Winston Churchill, Meghan, and Naomi Campbell. So I'm not quite sure,
Right. Yeah. But again, it's amazing, and just I suppose just shows the need for these stories being told that people aren't, they aren't getting elsewhere. And another thing that strikes me about your work, and actually Lisa's work as well, is just this idea of sort of celebrating this multiplicity of voices and achievements. So obviously you're celebrating 100 Great Black Britons, who together tell the story, and then with Windrush Day as well, it's honouring not one person but the entire Windrush generation and their achievements. So I was sort of thinking about this sort of idea of almost like 100 Great Black Britons is not quite an anthology, but it's the same sort of idea, this sort of collectiveness. So I guess I was thinking about that in relation to your work, Lisa, with common people, this sort of politics of writing in an anthology, celebrating a multiplicity of voices rather than positioning one person above another in terms of celebrating writers. So I wonder if you could say a bit about that.
Well, it was Kit Duvall's baby, obviously, when she'd got her lovely book deal with Penguin, and she said that she often felt like she gatecrashed a party that she wasn't really sure why she was there. Where are all my kind of people? And so began her kind of route of activism, really, to sort of start to address those class ceilings that still exist in publishing. And this London centricity that is also attached to it as well, and that kind of really dictates very much about who we are commemorating as well. It's really interesting that I think it's been that kind of country where we all feel like we have to go to London to become a writer, and this is where we'll all make it. But Common People literally came about that. It was about offering opportunities to writers who identified as working class or came from working class backgrounds. And so it was a mixture of professional writers, for want of a better phrase, and new voices. So it worked with the UK-wide literature development agencies in offering those opportunities. And the fact that all our names appeared on the front of the book, showed that there was nobody in alphabetical order, nobody was higher than anybody. And it featured a tour, and it's obviously Professor Katie Shaw up at Northumbria University. She's been doing some research on the back of it with New Writing North, just to kind of continue that dialogue about these class ceilings. And some things have started to manifest, but Patrick, lots like your work, it's so all kind of moves at this glacial pace. Do you know what I mean? As strong as your kind of collective is, I always kind of feel that we've got very small ice picks. We're just and one day it'll all kind of be a little bit more inviting, perhaps.
I really hope so. I mean, that's another thing that we're looking at novel perceptions, sort of the geographical differences and responses to literature, both as writers and as readers. I mean, both of you coming from the West Midlands, do you feel that geography played a part in your reading preferences? Do you have any sort of association with literature in the Midlands? I don't know.
Well, I certainly, I'm a child of the late 70s, early 80s in Stoke-on-Trent, and we certainly weren't exposed to any local literature. We never did any Arnold Bennett in Stoke. I spent my secondary school in Shrewsbury. We never did any Mary Webb. And I always think it's a great shame, because to have those local authors studied, it's a really good way to encourage new voices to actually write about the region where they're from, and also to see how it's been reflected, and for people to kind of identify with that literature as well. I mean, books for me always seem to be set elsewhere. I never really saw the potteries reflected back at me. So I never kind of thought about it as the sense, I don't know, as a writer, I'm always kind of really intrigued by the sense of place and belonging, and the placelessness of how we become, through sort of social mobility and all of that. And none of that when I was younger, no.
I mean, I feel the same sort of, growing up in Bradford again, sort of, I felt like, I'd read children's books, and often they were just, set somewhere that wasn't where I was growing up. I think we had Brother on the Land, which is about a nuclear holocaust in Bradford, but that was basically it. So
I suppose in a way it's difficult as well, because with children's books, it's those to get children reading anyway, is in whatever way possible, is amazing.
Yeah, of course.
But it's also that and I think the big thing that I've always tried not to do is sort of go down that kind of social realism route.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Because it's a very, very fine line between what you're kind of representing and then what you're kind of projecting as a manifesto in a way. So
yeah. What about you, Patrick, with any sort of
very, very similar. I mean, I'm a child of the 70s, so I was really wasn't much of a look. I mean, the only book I can remember which had a kind of a regional perspective was reading Arnold Wesker stuff. That was seemed to be one of the main. That's classed in that was at school. That's in the modern fiction and modern literature, basically. There's all the standard stuff that you read, basically. I think it's different now. I think the curriculum around literature is more interesting and varied compared to the time I was at school. It's very basic, because I mean, if you were like, it's almost like it's quite equivalent to what was happening on TV. Well, we were 3 TV channels, and that was it. At least now you've got a multitude, but that was a spectrum of definitely going to a comprehensive school. That was the spectrum.
Yeah, completely. So, I mean, again, thinking about writers from these places, because I think often, again, we sort of, so much of publishing is centred around down south and so forth. But yet, there obviously are rich literary cultures everywhere. I mean, are there particular writers? Before we move on to the literary days, generally, are there particular Midlands writers either of you would who are underrated or aren't read enough, but should be read more, that you would? I
mean, just to add, I mean, what's happened, I've noticed, I think you've got lots of people who've done, like, if you look at Mira Sayal, Lenny Henry, others, who are now writing their memoirs, and I think Lenny Henry's writing a children's book, isn't he? So people, Benjamin Zephaniah from Birmingham, even though he's living in Norfolk. But I think what's happened is people are now in a position of they may have been successful in different professions and different careers. I mean, that was me. Look, in my background, I've worked in health and social care for many years. I'll do a lot of stuff around cultural history, but it's almost like we just feel like we've got the permission to write. And it's taken a long time for a lot of people to have that permission to write. Because, and the only why you're writing is because either you feel that you've got really something to say. Actually, you've got more than something to say. You've got loads to say, but it's taken a long time to build that confidence to write. And for people to accept you, and I think especially if you're a person of colour, the level sometimes is our story valid or recognised or important, and that never leaves the whole experience of writing.
Completely.
Yeah, it's that imposter syndrome, isn't
it?
Is my story worth? I always remember asking my nan, "Oh, I should write your life," and she said, "Why? I've not done anything," And you think, "Crikey, you were making ammunition during the war. You were doing this. You were doing that." And it is just the fact that they don't feel like their stories are worthwhile and valid or credible, or when actually they are the most beautiful and authentic and rich, because they're so simple.
Yeah, completely. I suppose again that gets back to the idea of what do we think literature should consist of? What sort of story should it be telling? I mean, one great thing that Ulysses, I think, did was kind of broaden the types of lives that could be worthy of this this sort of book. I mean, Ulysses, it's an ordinary man going about his day. So in that sense, I suppose it did sort of suggest that this is something that we can write an entirely long and impenetrable novel about. So
yeah,
I mean, interesting, in the Caribbean there is a very strong tradition of writing, of the powerful Caribbean literature, canons of Caribbean writing, and so and it's taken a long time for publishers to really start to respect and value that. So I think it's I think the work that that this project that you're doing is really important, because I think it's to give people the opportunity, the skills, the space to write stuff. And I think that's really, really important, really. you know, and I think there's lots of writers in the Midlands, in Wolverhampton and Black Country.
Yeah.
But they just need to be given the permission to write.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I will always champion Mary Webb. You know, simply because I did a lot of work on her actually, you know, a few years ago, and started to realise that actually she had just as much to say, if not more, as Virginia Woolf in terms of, you know, the feminist agenda. But today you have got a really rich network of writers, and largely because, you know, we have Writing West Midlands in this area. I'm a trustee of that. I'm part of their Room 204 Writer Development Programme. So we have this kind of appointment place where everybody can come together, where everybody can share ideas. And, you know, at Wolverhampton, we have modules that are very much dedicated to showcasing that local talent, you know, so it's coming back to that idea of, which is what kind of Patrick is saying, that inside interior perspective of where you are from or where you are, where you live, is entirely credible and valuable, you know, valuable to write about, because it's not always about that outsider's perspective. You know, that tourist, you know, that kind of tourist perspective that sometimes authors are guilty of.
Yeah, completely. So Mary Webb Day.
Well, I was going to say the Mary Webb Society, they are wonderful, and I was, you know, we were talking earlier about these little literature societies really that are kept going largely on the fumes of enthusiasm and volunteering and all of that. But without them, you know, these books would disappear, these authors would disappear, because who else is going to pass them on to the next generation? Because we have this criterion of what a classic is, and, you know, how do we muscle into those classics? You know, how do we start to ask whether there are these gaps that, you know, where should we be plugging these gaps, and with whom, you know? So thank God really that there are people out there that will you know, host that Arnold Bennett Society and the Mary Webb Society, and they do, you know, they have their days of celebration on Mary Webb's birthday, and
yeah.
I
suppose again it does just take, you know, a few people who have the time and the inclination to sort of promote that day, and then maybe it snowballs and becomes a thing. So it's quite piecemeal. I mean, out of writers that you two personally, like, other people who you'd like to see having days that don't currently have days, if they should have them?
Well, it's interesting because back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a Black Radical Book Fair that used to take place in Camden Town Hall, organised by the late John the Rose and his wife and the whole range. And it was a fantastic, probably lasted for about 8-10 years, but it was an opportunity for writers, not just Black writers, but writers from the Commonwealth and diaspora, radical writers as well, to network, to share experiences, to get books you wouldn't get access to, that you would normally. This is before the age of obviously internet and stuff like that. So you know, when you go get books, obviously go to a bookshop, but going to this fair, you saw a whole range of books from Latin America, from Africa, from the Caribbean, from France, and that was really fantastic. And it'd be great to sort of, I mean, it's different now, you know, it'd be great to capture that a type of festival of that sort again, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, if you can't even access the writers in the first place, then how are you going to know about them? So again, it comes down to, you know, so the internet obviously does give us access to a lot of things, but again, you know, we have to know about the writers in order to go seek them out. You know, even if we're looking at Amazon, it might recommend us the odd thing, but, you know, without the sort of, you know, the backing and publicity behind a book, which again,
I suppose as well that the problem is when you do memorialise one individual, that obviously comes at the expense of marginalising everybody else. You know, and I think you know, the way that I kind of always think about this is that actually it's far better to have, like Patrick is saying about these kind of book fairs, the events, the festivals, National Poetry Day, because I think things like that teachers can get hold, you know, can grab hold of and include into that curriculum, because, you know, the more that we're battling against the arts being taken out, you know, that these are the kind of moments in the curriculum that really start to fuel those young writers, those new voices, you know, and how to kind of play with language and work outside those parameters and boundaries. So I'm much more for those kind of things than the actual physical idea of a statue, you know, because largely they're there anyway as an artistic interpretation. You know, don't forget an artist reflecting, collaborating with another. So, you know, hence why the Wollstonecraft was so contentious, wasn't it? I actually think it's rather beautiful, but
but as I say, it is really, you know, it's one fixed thing, and you're not going to please everybody. If it's representational, basically whatever you do with a statue, somebody's not going to like it, and possibly lots of people.
Well, the thing with statues, a majority of statues in Britain are paid for by private subscription, either fundraise. I mean, there are very few statues that is funded by the state, to be quite honest. And that's why when we have these conversations around the cultural wars, around statues connected with the slave trade, they were funded by individuals, glorifying individuals. And yet people make them, they're actually part of history, not really part of history. You know what I mean? You know, it's just a projection of people who've got money or raised the money, and it's not a hero, and you like it or not, you're going to like it.
I always think it's really interesting that Barry Hines and Alan Sillitoe, you know, two of, you know, my kind of favorite authors in a way, both their kind of statues and memorials have had to be crowdfunded. You know, they're not actually seen as those kind of literary greats, despite the fact that Kes was on the curriculum for years. I don't quite know why it got taken off, but crowdfunded.
Great. I guess now's the time to open it up more widely to the audience. Are there particular questions that you have? Are there people that you think should have literary days or statues, if that's a good idea, or other forms of memorialisation? So do please add your questions. We've already got a couple. So one saying a group in Leicester is trying to crowdfund £80,000 for a statue of Gayakan Joe Orton, and they haven't succeeded yet, and it's about pride in regional culture. And do we think this is part of a shift towards the reappreciation of the regional and the non-London, which I guess just taps into what we were talking about, really? It's it's that thing, isn't it, what we're kind of talking about? It's that monetization of commemoration in a way. And then it becomes that sort of active commodity of being able to get that money to do it, when actually, what a shame that the, you know, councils or, you know, the state could see the importance of it. Completely. Okay, got another another question. Should we focus on statues, or is it better to get out of print books made available, which seems a better new lease of life?
Oh, absolutely, definitely. There are so many books out of print which I mean, new artists need to come back, and you know, so I think that might be that should be a nice little campaign. The top 10 out of print books of all. How about that?
Completely. Because even in the age of books and Amazon, you know, sometimes you just can't get hold of a thing.
Actually, it applies to records as well. You know, like not everything's on Spotify.
Absolutely,
certain singles and albums that if they're still, you know, they're on the vinyl, and you need to buy the vinyl.
It's like John Mitchison's Backlisted podcast, which is wonderful because it takes books that are out of print or forgotten stories or forgotten authors or authors that they feel need that, you know, celebration again. Perhaps they didn't have all that recognition that they had first time around, and that's what it's all about, is you know, making sure that there is that kind of space for them to be discussed, and you know, everything's not kind of sidelined because it doesn't fall into a marketing category.
Completely.
Actually, what's happened as a result of Black Lives Matter, as you know, publishers are now become woke debate, and they've actually now there are some black books which have been out of print, written by black authors have been out of print over here in America and the UK, which are now I've got a new lease of life. So I think that's quite interesting, really. You know.
Completely, like Bernardine Evaristo's new series of black women writers.
Like the one of the books that the publishers, I think, have done it. They sent me a copy of their all. Gilroy's book,
Mm-hmm.
who's the mother of Paul Gilroy.
Right.
I've actually got the original book, I believe, but her memoirs. So I've got a second one of the updated version, which is great.
Right.
Well.
Right. Yeah. Got another question. Just well, that's one of the partly answered. Any particular out of print books that should be reissued? So do you have any beyond these? Any personal favourites that should be reissued?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm just thinking, actually. I'm looking at my books in front of me. Which ones are missing?
Yeah.
You know when you have a book and you bought it and someone's borrowed it and you've lost it and it's gone without a trace.
Oh, it's the worst.
I'm still trying to work out those books have gone without a trace.
Yeah, you've lent it to somebody and they've moved to a different country or something. You know they've got it.
Yes.
You can't get it again. Or if you did it won't be that copy of the book. So it's not the same.
I suppose in a way as well, it's what it's when it's out of print, but what's also available in the charity shop. Yeah.
And there's one book actually.
There's
one I would love to get. It was written in 1972 by a historian called Edward Scobie, who was I can't remember which Caribbean island he was born in, but he spent most of his time in America and he lived in Britain for a while. But he wrote a book called Black Britannia in 1972, which is about the history of Black Britons, basically. And I remember having that book and I was originally going to call my campaign not 100 Great Black Britain, but Black Britannia, based on that book. By the way, I had that book and it's gone. I would love to have that book again.
Have to look out for it.
So anyone out there on the chat or Black Britannia, Edward Scobie, if you got a copy for me, I'll buy you a drink.
Excellent. Yeah, everyone get looking. Yes, got another comment about online, just a comment about sort of online audiences. Yeah, sort of again, the reflection that it can help for sort of the reach of events. And again, we talk about this, the digital communities that we can build. But yeah, we don't have that.
I'll give a good example of that. So I had so when it came to the launch of 100 Great Black Britons, I worked with an organisation in London called Ubele, and we did a book launch using their Zoom platform, and we pushed it and stuff like that. And guess how many people that were on the Facebook page, on the YouTube link, as well as on the Zoom link? We had about 800 people.
Wow, it's amazing.
You know what I mean? And then 2 days later, we had an email from our publishers and said that night, Amazon had placed an order for extra 200 books. Now, that would never have happened in the real world. If we were probably been the community events, maybe about 50 people, 100 people for lucky, might sell about 40 copies. So that tells you the power of harnessing the internet and connecting as well.
Yeah, completely. I mean that's amazing. You say just wouldn't have happened.
Lots of people were stuck at home anyway, so that was easy, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think books in general have done really well during the pandemic. I mean, again, there's no good sides of the situations. I don't want to say there are, but like people have at least been, I think reading and sharing books and connecting online with them, as you say. So it's a small silver lining. Got another recommendation here for Dorothy Richardson's Pilgrimage Service series. So I can't talk, which should be reprinted. Who's not somebody I've come across actually. So thank you for that. I don't know if either of you know them. Yeah. Any further questions that anybody has? Any comments? Any recommendations? Any nominations for literary days?
I suppose I've got a question actually. Yeah. I'm allowed.
Of course.
Obviously, this is fantastic. We've got the Wolverhampton Literature Festival. I wish that the festival was around when I was, at school. I'm living in Wolverhampton before I moved down to London. And I suppose the question is, I mean, if you look at literature festivals, obviously you've got Hay and Cheltenham and stuff like that. You've got local ones as well. And I suppose the question is, it's about the democratisation of writing, reading, publishing and stuff like that. And I know it's been run by the council, so it depends on how much money the council's got. But do you think that eventually festivals like that will be complete independent or not? Or does it, it's just an interesting question about where festivals are going.
I don't know, and it's a really interesting question, and I suppose if it becomes independent, then is it, I guess the ideal bit, if it becomes totally self-sustaining, because if it's sort of being funded by a private enterprise, then it might be subject to, you know, certain, like, there might be agendas that people are sort of working towards. I don't know. So yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, but I think a lot of them probably are becoming so.
I was going to say, as far as I know, I think most literary festivals now are actually run independently or set themselves up as charities with the trustees, in order to get them going. At which point they're funded by sponsorship more than anything, and Arts Council funding.
Yes.
I did some work with Much Wenlock Poetry Festival for a couple of years, and that was largely Arts Council funded. And I think that, you know, and there was lots of different other means of funding that came from, like Kickstarter, the, you know, crowdfunding platforms. They try and make them, you know, to bring them to life, they kind of rely on that community interaction as much as possible, because I just don't think it kind of fits into councils. I mean, we have a small festival in Shrewsbury that's run kind of independently. There was Emma Bridgewater's which was the Hot Air Festival in Stoke-on-Trent, that was independent. Do you know what I mean? So I think Wolverhampton at the moment is a little bit of an anomaly.
Right. Something else is contract crowdfunding. I suppose that goes to models of publishing as well. I think of things like Unbound, where you get like a community involved in the book as well. Yeah,
definitely. But the fact that all of this is around now is just amazing, you know.
And again, it's a tool like we wouldn't have had without the internet. And
no, not at all. And I think, you know, the fact that we have let's sort of look at a positive maybe that's come out of it in the way that we've been able to use this online community, is that it does mean that there is these kind of things available to those that would not be able to go otherwise, or just would not know about it.
Completely. And again, great that we can have this event in lockdown despite probably being behind their computer screens. So maybe that's a good note to wrap up on. So thank you ever so much, both of you, for coming along tonight and taking part. And thanks to everybody for coming along in the audience. And do please read Pondweed and 100 Great Black Britons. And if you find Patrick's book, do let him know. And thank you. So we will be holding more events. We're hoping to do a lot of literary events for Novel Perceptions in the autumn, particularly in October. So if you follow us on Twitter, we're at Novel Perceptions. At Novel Inquiries. Sorry, I do know that. I'm just putting that in the chat. I can't type and talk at the same time. Just a sec. There we go. So we're at Novel Inquiries if you want to follow us on Twitter and see what we're up to next. And please do take our surveys. We would absolutely love you if you fill those in and let us know what you enjoy reading and why. And enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks.
Bye.